How can a piece with no obvious climax, no clear destination, still feel so complete? That's the puzzle of Debussy's Prélude to the Afternoon of a Faun, a work that drifts, transforms, and dissolves like mist, yet somehow leaves us with the feeling that we've heard the entire story. My name is Hayrudin Juja, I'm a pianist-composer, and in the last video we explored the historical and programmatic side of this piece, its origins, its inspiration, and its place in music history. Today we step inside the music itself. We'll trace its form, uncover its harmonic language, explore its thematic material, and most importantly, see how Debussy's orchestration turns this score into a living, breathing soundscape. Although Debussy called it a prelude, this is not the kind of prelude you will find in Chopin, Scriabin, a short self-contained miniature. Instead, it's closer to the Tristan and Isolde prelude by Wagner, something that would normally serve as a gateway to something larger, an opera act for instance. It opens with a brief introduction, a solo flute and shimmering harp glissandi. At rehearsal mark 1, the first main section begins. Rehearsal mark 2 brings the sound selection, similar in melodic material, but the texture shifts. At rehearsal mark 3, a new theme appears along with harmonies based on a whole tone scale. Then, a short 4-bar bridge leads us into a fourth section, which begins around page 15. From here, another 4-bar episode emerges, this time with the solo violin melody we've heard earlier. Rehearsal mark 8 signals the fifth section, and finally rehearsal mark 10 delivers the coda. The flute's opening solo returns, gently closing the work. Debussy builds the entire piece from a few core ideas, which he transforms again and again. Right at the start, we hear the signature flute solo, a descent of a tritone from C-sharp, repeated twice, before the harps sweep with the glissandi. Above this, two horns play short, imitative phrases like a distant echoes. The flute solo soon returns, but now it's extended by 2 extra bars. The oboe takes over, spinning a new theme from the last bar of the flute melody. This oboe line is expanded even further, with Debussy violins supporting it in octaves. At rehearsal mark 2, the flute solo comes back for the third time, longer, more varied, and shifted to different scale degrees. Rehearsal mark 3 introduces the clarinet with a new theme. Even here, traces of the flute solo remain. Chromatic ascents and descents weave through the line. The flute answers in imitation, leading us into the same theme a third higher. Rehearsal mark 4 presents an oboe solo, taken over by the first and second violins in octaves. They imitate the oboe's last bar and expand it, now supported by clarinet and flute. At rehearsal mark 5, we hear an imitative dialogue between oboes, flutes, and violins. Rehearsal mark 6 shifts the focus to a solo clarinet, playing the material derived from the violin theme on page 11. Page 15, the fourth section, unveils one of the most luminous themes in the work, an 8th bar woodwind melody. Debussy then passes it to a full string section, minus the basses, where it grows, enriched by the earlier flute triplets textures and oboe material. The episode before rehearsal mark 8 presents the same theme again, but over a different harmonic backdrop, played by a soaring solo violin. Rehearsal mark 8 revives the flute's tritone descent, now handed to the oboe. After the solo, playful woodwind staccato take over, and the whole passage repeats a semitone lower. Finally, at rehearsal mark 10, the coda arrives. The flute tritone solo returns one last time, varied, reshaped, and passed from the flutes and oboes to cellos, then back again to the flutes, until it dissolves into silence. Debussy's harmonic language here is both innovative and deeply expressive, mixing tradition with bold departures. We hear frequent use of half-diminished chords, dominants with added ninths or elevenths, major or minor sevenths, and even augmented sonorities. whole tone scales also play a central role, most notably around Rehearsal Mark III. Debussy often smooths his progressions through inversions, making transitions more natural. Examples appear on page 4, page 13, and Rehearsal Mark 10. Another device is the use of medians. Simply put, mediant relationships are chords whose roots are a third apart. If they belong to the same key, we call them diatonic medians. If not, they are chromatic medians. Debussy uses both, see page 19, Rehearsal 2 and Rehearsal 5, which allows him to shift harmonies in fresh but still convincing ways. One remarkable passage occurs on page 4, bar 4. Debussy writes a chord structurally identical to Wagner's famous Tristan chord, even spelled with the same pitches, F written as E sharp. Yet, unlike Wagner, Debussy resolves it freely, without traditional expectations. Modal colors are also present, a touch of Dorian on page 12, last bar, or Mixolydian on page 13, bar 1. Resolutions frequently surprise us. For example, on page 16, second bar, a dominant B chord resolves not to E minor, but to a clear A minor. On page 21, a D-flat dominant suddenly resolves to E major in second inversion. Debussy also explores tritone substitutions. On page 4, we see A-flat 6-5 chord moving to B dominant, then A-sharp dominant, a reimagining of how the 7th scale degree in minor can act like a group of substitute subdominants in a 2-5-1 chain. In smaller doses, he even uses octatonic harmonies. Page 3 moves E major, C-sharp dominant 6-5, B-flat dominant 4-3 chord, while page 21 shifts from D-flat dominant to E major second inversion. Another hallmark is his shifting of chord quality while keeping the same root. On page 22, for example, an A minor 4-3 chord transforms into a A dominant ninth. Later in the following repetition of the episode, transposed down a semitone, G sharp minor 4-3 chord becomes G sharp dominant ninth. We find similar transformations elsewhere, F sharp minor to F sharp diminished, or A flat major 7 to A flat dominant 7. All of this shows how Debussy keeps harmony alive, not static blocks of sound, but constantly morphing colors. One of the most fascinating aspects of this prelude is its orchestration. Not just which instruments Debussy uses, but how he balances, blends, and transforms their colors. For this section, I've marked the score on the screen. Pink for melody, green for harmony, yellow for effects, and orange for counterpoint or secondary lines. At Rehearsal Mark 1, we find a D7 chord in the strings. The second violins are divided, meaning only half their volume is available, so Debussy reinforces the sound by doubling those same notes in the clarinets. The result is every chord tone speaks with equal weight. He avoids the dullness of static notes by distributing harmonies across the orchestra in fragments, creating inner movement. On page 4, for example, the voicing shifts between violas and second violins, then expands with passing notes, horns, flutes, and bassoons. A similar richness appears on page 18, where even though one chord lasts for full bar, the winds, including 4 horns and double basses, keep it alive through the way the voices are spread and led. Color blends are also another hallmark. In the very first D7 chord, he could have written it plainly for the strings, D in second violins and F sharp in the firsts. But by sharing those notes with clarinets, he creates a more vibrant mix of timbres. Debussy also loved rich chord distributions across the entire orchestra. At Rehearsal 8, page 27, for example, and again on page 4, chords are voiced so widely and delicately that harmony itself becomes an event of sounds. At Rehearsal 6, we even see a Rimsky-Korsakov trick. Instead of 4 stacked horns, Debussy distributes the chord between 2 bassoons and 2 horns. Leaner in weight, richer in color. These are small details, but they reveal Debussy as both a colorist and a craftsman. When Debussy wants a melody to be pure and brilliant, he gives it to a solo instrument. That's why the opening flute line is written for just one flute, not two in unison. Writing for two would thicken the sound and blur the individuality. A solo flute, on the other hand, feels intimate and crystal clear. That said, when more volume is needed, Debussy isn't afraid to use two of the same instruments together, or even octaves, as on pages 12 and 13. And when he wants real power, he entrusts the entire section with the melody, as we hear on page 16 in the winds or page 17 in the strings, minus the basses. He always considers range and timbre, which register brings out the instrument's most characteristic color. Debussy also uses overlapping entries to create fluid shifts of tone color. On page 10, a melody passes seamlessly from clarinet to flute to oboe. The line itself is continuous, but the changing colors keep it alive. The role of the harp is crucial, not just in glissandi but as a coloristic accent. To write effectively for it, a composer must understand the pedal system and how to build glissandos in scales like pentatonic or whole tone. In the introduction, for example, Debussy builds a half-diminished color by doubling pedal notes A-sharp B-flat, C-sharp D-flat, E natural F-flat plus G-sharp. Elsewhere, pages 10, 14, 17, harps act like sparkling punctuation in the texture. Percussion, too, is used with extreme subtlety. Antique cymbals appear in the coda, adding a faint shimmer that reinforces the ancient aura of Mallarmé's faune. Finally, Debussy explores string effects like sul tasto, playing over the fingerboard, as on rehearsal 10 and page 23, to soften the sound into a veiled, hazy glow. And that brings us to the end of our analysis. Of course, if we were to go measure by measure, this video could easily last 3 hours. But instead, I wanted to highlight the essential ideas that make Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun such a masterpiece. Its seamless form, ever-shifting themes, daring harmonies, and the magical orchestration that gives the music its unique color. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more explorations of great music. And let me know in the comments what aspects of this piece fascinates you the most, and what you'd like to see in the next video. Should I do another analysis, and if so, which piece should I analyze? Thank you for watching.